Balance doesn't disappear all at once. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up with a clear moment you can point to and say, that's when it started. For most people over 65, balance fades quietly, politely, almost respectfully. One small hesitation here, one subtle adjustment there, a hand reaching for the wall without thinking, a step that gets shorter without permission. And before anyone notices, balance is no longer something you trust. It becomes something you manage. What makes this especially confusing is that many people feel strong. Their legs still work, they can walk, they can stand, they can even move quickly when they have to. And yet, something feels off. Turns feel less certain. Uneven ground feels intimidating. Reaching while standing creates a moment of doubt. This disconnect leaves people wondering what they're missing. They go to appointments. They mention stiffness. They mention caution. They mention fear of falling. But there's one daily movement, repeated countless times, that almost no one talks about. Not because it's rare, but because it's normal, and because it looks harmless. This movement happens inside homes every day. It happens in kitchens, bedrooms, hallways, and living rooms. It happens when no one is watching. It happens so often that it becomes invisible. And slowly, patiently, it teaches the body to give up balance without realizing it has done so. The movement is not walking itself. It's how people move while walking indoors. Specifically, how they move while using their surroundings for support. Most people over 65 begin to rely on furniture, walls, counters, and door frames as they move through their homes. At first, it's occasional. A hand brushes the counter while passing. Fingers slide along the back of a chair. A palm rests briefly on the wall while turning. It doesn't feel like support. It feels like convenience, like familiarity, like being smart in your own space. No one calls this a problem, and that's exactly why it becomes one. Balance is not a fixed trait. It's a skill. And like any skill, it changes based on how often it's practiced and how often it's bypassed. When the body learns that support is always available, it stops fully engaging the systems that keep you upright. Not all at once, just enough to matter over time. The human balance system is always asking a question. Do I need to handle this, or is something else handling it for me? When the answer becomes something else, the system politely steps back. Muscles don't fire as quickly. Adjustments become slower. Awareness narrows. And because this happens gradually, it feels like age rather than habit. Inside the home, people move differently than they do outside. Outside, there are fewer things to hold. Inside, there's always something nearby. The body learns this distinction. It relaxes indoors. It becomes alert outdoors. That's why many people feel more unsteady in their own homes than they expect. The environment has taught their balance system to switch off. This daily movement pattern is rarely mentioned because it doesn't look dangerous. There's no fall, no stumble, no dramatic loss of control. It looks like safety. It looks like prevention. But safety that removes responsibility from the body eventually removes capability. Doctors often focus on strength, vision, medications, and conditions. These matter. But balance is not just about physical components. It's about behavior. And behavior is harder to see in a short appointment. No one watches how you walk from the bedroom to the kitchen. No one sees how often your hand reaches out automatically. No one notices the micro decisions your body makes dozens of times a day. And yet, those micro decisions shape your future far more than a single test ever could. When the hand reaches for support before it's truly needed, the brain receives a message. This situation requires help. Over time, the brain begins to assume help will always be required. That assumption changes posture. It changes step length. It changes how weight is transferred from one foot to the other. The body becomes more rigid, not because it's stronger, but because it's unsure. Uncertainty is poison to balance. People often describe balance loss as weakness, but it's more accurate to describe it as hesitation. Hesitation slows reaction time. Hesitation stiffens movement. Hesitation makes turns feel risky. And hesitation grows when the body is no longer practiced at handling small challenges independently. Think about how often you turn while walking inside your home. Turning is one of the most complex balance tasks the body performs. It requires coordination, timing, and trust. But indoors, many people turn while touching something. A counter, a chair, a doorway. The turn becomes supported. The body doesn't need to organize itself fully. The skill slowly dulls. Months pass, years pass. Then one day, a turn without support feels uncomfortable. Not impossible, just uncomfortable. And that discomfort reinforces the habit of reaching for something next time. The loop tightens. What makes this even more impactful is that balance thrives on variability. The body needs to experience slight challenges to stay responsive. When movement becomes overly predictable and supported, the system becomes less adaptable. And adaptability is the heart of balance. There's also an emotional layer. Reaching for support creates a sense of control in the moment. It feels reassuring. But that reassurance comes at a cost. It subtly tells the body, you can't do this alone. Over time, that belief becomes embodied. The body starts acting as if it's true. People rarely question this because it feels responsible. After all, why risk a fall? But the risk doesn't come from practicing balance. It comes from abandoning it. Balance doesn't fail because it's challenged. It fails because it's neglected. Inside the home, this daily movement becomes a training ground for imbalance, not because people are careless, but because they are too careful in the same way every time. The body stops receiving the small signals it needs to stay sharp. And then something interesting happens. People begin to feel less steady, even when they are holding on to something. The support no longer feels sufficient. They grip harder. They slow down more. They narrow their steps. The body is trying to compensate for a system that has lost confidence. This is when fear often enters the picture. Not fear of falling in general, but fear of unexpected movement. Fear of being bumped. Fear of turning too quickly. Fear of reaching while standing. That fear changes breathing. It raises tension. It further degrades balance. All of this can happen while strength remains relatively intact, which is why it confuses people. They don't understand why balance is declining when they can still walk and stand. The missing piece is practice, or rather, the lack of it. The body is always practicing something, even when you think you're resting. When you rely on support daily, you are practicing reliance. When you avoid slight instability, you are practicing avoidance. The body gets very good at whatever it practices. This daily movement is rarely mentioned because it doesn't look like a movement. It looks like a habit layered on top of movement. It looks like a hand on a counter, a shoulder near a wall, a path chosen because it has more things to hold. It looks invisible. But the consequences are not invisible. People often say, "I'm fine as long as I'm careful." That sentence reveals everything. Balance has shifted from being automatic to being conditional. And conditional balance is fragile balance. What's important to understand is that regaining balanced confidence does not require risky behavior. It requires awareness. Awareness of how often you default to support when it's not truly necessary. Awareness of how your body responds when you don't. When people begin to notice this habit, they're often surprised by how automatic it is. The hand reaches out before the body has even tested itself. That realization alone is powerful, because it opens the door to choice. Choice restores balance faster than force ever could. The body doesn't need to be thrown into instability. It needs to be reminded that it can handle small challenges. A step without touching, a turn without bracing, a moment of standing without leaning. These moments reawaken systems that haven't been used fully in years. Over time, the body relearns trust. Reaction time improves. Posture softens. Movement becomes smoother. Not because the person is younger, but because the body is more engaged. This is why many people feel more unsteady in familiar environments than in new ones. New environments demand attention. Familiar ones invite autopilot. And autopilot is where balance quietly erodes. The tragedy is not that balance declines. It's that people assume it must. That assumption leads to resignation. And resignation is far more damaging than age. Aging does not mean surrendering skills. It means maintaining them differently. Balance after 65 is not about proving anything. It's about preserving independence. It's about moving through your own home without fear. It's about trusting your body to respond when life surprises you. Doctors rarely mention this daily movement because it's not dramatic, but you live in the dramatic consequences if it goes unexamined. If this feels familiar, that's not a warning. It's an invitation to notice, to observe how you move when no one is watching, to see whether support has become a default rather than a tool. Support is not the enemy. Overuse is. This is also why sharing conversations like this matters. When you like this video, when you comment with your experience, when you subscribe, you're participating in a culture of awareness. You're choosing understanding over fear. You're reinforcing the idea that staying steady is not about luck, but about daily choices. Balance is not something you lose overnight, and it's not something you regain overnight either. But it responds beautifully to attention, especially when that attention is calm, curious, and consistent. The next time you walk through your home, notice what your hands do. Notice what your body expects. Notice whether balance is being practiced or bypassed. That noticing alone begins to change the conversation inside your body. And your body, just like always, is listening.